Hello everyone, welcome back to another Kerbal Space Program 2 video, and today I wanted to do something that I've always enjoyed doing in Kerbal Space Program 1 and 2, and that is looking at a real-world mission that was planned, often to a very detailed extent, but never actually executed. And some of the most interesting missions in that vein are the stuff that happened immediately after the Apollo moon landing. So kind of the future of Apollo, the future of Soyuz and all of that. And in this video I thought, why not recreate, you kind of do a soft recreation at least, of the planned Apollo Venus mission. That's right, the Americans actually planned to use a Saturn V to send astronauts all the way to Venus on a flyby and then deploy some probes into the atmosphere, Venera style I guess. Very, very interesting stuff, but of course, as we know, never actually happened. But I thought it might be interesting because it did have some very, interesting components to it. But I don't want to keep on using the word interesting, but it was a very interesting old time. As you can see, the rocket is pretty much built. I didn't feel the need to spend too much time showcasing the build of the Saturn V itself, because I'm guessing you guys have seen videos of Saturn Vs being built in KSP 1 and KSP 2 ad nauseum at this point, so I didn't feel there was too much need to dwell on the specific build of the rocket. But here you can see we've sort of zoomed down in. I'm building a couple of probes that will detach, well, I guess exit from this small cargo bay in order to descend down to the Venusian surface, taking some readings of its atmosphere. I've put the little sniffer experiments on board the probes. The probes are a clone of each other. I didn't really know how to kind of make them different. The science experiments in Kerbal Space Program 2 are very big, and the little sniffer was really the only experiment that would have fit. I did consider just having one bigger probe that descended down, but the real manned Apollo Venus flyby mission, most of the plans involve sending two probes down. So I figured, why don't we just do like a redundancy thing? So there's the same probe, but there's a redundant one, so if one fails, there's the other one basically. So that's that, and there's the Saturn V. Now we've zoomed out. Of course, it still needs painting, which is what I'm going to do now. And I'm just staring at the screen, scratching my head, trying to think if there's anything else I need to discuss with the build of the Saturn V, but I don't think there is. One thing, it's quite difficult to make a good-looking Saturn V in Kerbal Space Program 2 because we don't have that little engine cluster piece to attach the F1 engines to at the bottom, so I had to use nose cones and kind of clip them into the bottom fuel tank. And also, there isn't really a very good analog for the F1 engine in Kerbal Space Program 2. We got the mainsail, which is a bit too small, and we've got the Mammoth, which to me is a bit too big. We haven't really got an engine that kind of falls in between the two, so that was kind of a shame. We also don't really have a J2 equivalent either, so in this video I'm using the Skipper as my J2 engine stand-in, although, as you may know, the second stage of the Saturn V has 5 J2 engines, so in this case I'd need to arrange the skippers in a pattern of 5, but the skipper engine is really big, like above the top part of the engine that attaches to the base of the rocket. It's got this really wide flange, and so to try and squish 5 of them to kind of be contained within the interstage fairing, the engine bells would always clip into each other, and then the center engine would just get destroyed by overheating. So for the purposes of this video, because I wanted to have 5 engines in the second stage, right, the center engine I've swapped it out for a Reliant engine, so it's slightly different. It's not 5 of the same engine, but that's just a compromise I had to make. And you can see on the upper stage, I added 2 large solar panels and some Twitch engines as well. Intriguing. What could they be used for? I'm sure we'll cover that later on in the video when we're in flight. But right now, we need to go to the tracking station and time warp to an Eve transfer window. Yes, of course, there is no real solar system in KSP 2. So we're going to be going to Eve for this mission because Eve is, of course, the in-game analog for Venus. At an Eve transfer window, draw a line from Kerbin to the sun to Eve. Eve should be 54 degrees behind Kerbin, as in the angle that line forms of the sun should be 54 degrees. And with that, we can crossfade to the launch pad and, well, launch. Oh, it's a beautiful thing, the Saturn V taking flight. Now, it is probably worth noting that the Saturn V, of course, is a real-life rocket, or was a real-life rocket, I guess would be more accurate, designed to get off the real planet Earth. In Kerbal Space Program, Kerbin is substantially easier to reach orbit than Earth because it's much, much smaller. And so if you build an accurate Saturn V, although actually looking at it, maybe the top stage is a bit long. I don't know. It looks pretty. I think it's pretty close. Building an accurate-looking Saturn V is always a little bit overkill. You always have a bit more delta V than you really need. At least when I'm flying, maybe I'm just that good at the game. JK, of course. Yeah, we are going to have to dump stages before they fully run out of fuel. Not the first stage, though. We're going to burn that one to completion because the second stage, it hasn't got very good thrust-to-weight ratio, so it's going to take a while for us to get to space. And there we are, staging. We've got the little Separatrons on both the detached stage and the remainder of the rocket. These would normally detach as well, as would the interstage ring, but I feel like making things too complicated in KSP2. I still don't quite trust things to not glitch out and spaghetti, but maybe there's a future video I can make where I just really spend many hours trying to make as accurate a Saturn V as possible. But there are people who are much better at building accurate rocket replicas than I am, so there's probably already people that have done it way better than I ever could. Anyway, here we are on the way to space. There goes the launch escape system, and you can see our Kerbals there at the top. Now, you might think it's a bit cruel, right? Sending astronauts, like, it's one thing sending astronauts to the moon in an Apollo capsule. Okay, boring, cramped conditions. It's not that long, though. A mission to Venus is a substantially longer amount of time. Surely NASA would not have done this. Well, you're right, they wouldn't have done this because they didn't. But also, they would not have sent astronauts to Venus in just the capsule. You probably noticed in the build that we still have, like, a space for the Apollo lunar lander on the Saturn V, but we don't need an Apollo lunar lander, right? Because we're not landing on the moon, and we're certainly not landing on Venus. Would definitely be a one-way trip if we were. So instead of having the LEM module, there would have been like a laboratory module, I guess, kind of inspired by Skylab. I don't know if inspired is really the right word, but based on kind of Skylab and all that, there would have been a laboratory there for the Kerbals to the human astronauts to live on, and there would have been something else as well to make the space even bigger. We'll get to that in just a second, because right now we gotta reconfigure this thing. Yep, much like the actual Apollo moon landing missions, the Apollo Venus flyby mission would have seen a similar maneuver where the command module has to detach from the lower stage, then do a big spin around, re-dock with it. But of course, this time we're not docking with the lunar lander and pulling it away from that stage. We're just going to dock with the lab, and we're going to keep it attached to that lower stage, because of course the lower stage is our power bus, right? It's got the big solar panels on it. As you can see, when the stage is detached, for some reason some rotational velocity was enacted upon that lower stage. So I just got Jeb to do a quick slam down, a ground pound on it to get it kind of aligned. I think it went pretty well, and we can use his magnet. I tried to walk around it using his magnetic boots to get back to the hatch, but it didn't really work very well. So back to the EVA pack it was. Get Jebediah coming back on board, and there we are. Nice, big, healthy space for the astronauts. And that's as big as the space is going to get for them for now, but it will expand a little bit later on. But not right this second. First of all, I'm just going to get this thing into a nice, stable Kerbin orbit before going ahead and setting up a maneuver plan that'll get us on our Eve/Venus flyby. And to perform our orbital insertion and indeed our Kerbin to Eve transfer, we're going to use the third stage of the Saturn V with its singular J2 engine, just like the real plan in NASA's manned Venus flyby mission. I keep wanting to say lunar for some reason. I guess Apollo, lunar, and all that stuff. There's probably going to be at some point in this video where I say the word lunar and just miss it, I guess, when I'm doing some proof watching. And there's probably going to be some smarty in the comments who's picked up on that, like, aha! Matt said lunar or Venus or Eve or Kerbin or Earth when he should have said the other one. I don't know. So there's a little challenge to write in the comments below. But hey, speaking of the comments below, if you're enjoying the video so far, leaving a like on the video, it really does help channels out, guys. So if you do leave a like on it, I always do appreciate it. Now you can see me planning our Eve encounter. Now, you may be familiar with the concept of the free return trajectory made use of in the Apollo lunar landing missions, whereby if for some reason, and say for example in the case of Apollo 13, lunar landing and indeed lunar circularization couldn't take place, the capsule would just swing by the moon and just return to Earth, no problemo. Same thing would have been the case in the Venus mission. It's slightly different in the case that it was always planned to just be a Venus flyby. The Venus flyby would have set the capsule on a trajectory straight back to Earth, no course corrections required. Now, this is possible in Kerbal Space Program. I know this because I do this all the time in KSP1 when it comes to doing really fuel-efficient missions to either the Joule system or ELU, where you got to do an Eve flyby, followed by a Kerbin flyby, and then another Kerbin flyby to kind of save loads of fuel. I've done missions where I've got an Eve encounter that immediately puts me on a Kerbin encounter. But yeah, I can't figure out, I don't think you can do that yet in KSP2. because I know there's a patched conic setting, but I can't seem to get my my maneuver plan line to continue after a certain point. So I couldn't literally set Kerbin as my target and set up my Flyby of Eve such that we would then encounter Kerbin. So slight deviation, I guess, from the real mission, that we're going to have to do some correction burns when we're at Eve to ensure we reach Kerbin again. But I guess kinda, I don't want to say too much at this stage because I don't want to spoil things. I want to keep the video engaging. But there were means for the real manned Venus flyby missions to, you know, make use of course correction burns. That's not with the Saturn V third stage, which is on its final burn right now, getting us all the way to Eve. Well, actually, you know, the maneuver planet in KSP, it ain't that accurate, and with a big burn like this, at kind of a weird angle, right? We're doing a bit of normal burning as well as prograde burning. The accuracy is never really that good. So at the end of the burn, we actually didn't even have an Eve encounter at all, let alone an Eve flyby like the one I'd set up. So we're going to have to do a couple of extra burns just to actually get the Eve encounter. Just in your head canon of this mission, just pretend it was all one burn. The maneuver plan was just accurate and it all worked out well the first time I did it. That's just one of the compromises with KSP, is that it's not always, well, the maneuver planner, I should say, is not always the most accurate. Maybe it'll improve with updates, but right now that's how it be, and it's workable. It's workable. I think if in terms of the stuff the KSP dev team needs to be working on, this is much lower priority. But speaking of things that the dev team needs to be working on, there will be a bit of a bug we're going to encounter in a few minutes. And it doesn't ruin the video, but it does degrade the quality of the video slightly, I think. And that, you know, you can probably hear there, right? The engine's burning, basically. Yeah, when I make Kerbal Space Program 1 and 2 videos, I always disable the in-game music, because when I'm editing, I like the videos to be a really nice, snappy pace, and so I always play around with the playback speed. So right now I think the footage is playing back at like 3 times faster than regular speed, just to keep things engaging. But of course, if I let the music play in the background, that's just going to mess with things. It would sound weird, right, to have the background music constantly changing in speed. But I feel like the same isn't really the same for engine noises, because it's just like a rumble, right? It doesn't really make that much of a difference if it's sped up or not. So I always turn off the music in the game so you can hear the engine sounds. But in about a minute or so, there will be no more engine sounds the rest of the video, because I had some really weird glitch. I don't know, has this happened to anyone else? By the way, just looking at the screen, we're setting up for kind of our Eve encounter correction burn that we shouldn't have needed to do if the maneuver plan had worked accurately. So that's what I'm just setting up there. In fact, setting up is probably the wrong word. We are currently executing. As you can hear, the engines are burning. So I just keep dragging out like, ooh, what's it gonna be? Oh, it's a glitch. It's not really that interesting. Yeah, basically, I don't know if this has happened to anyone else, where the engine sound of the game, like the sound of the engines burning, just starts playing and it just doesn't turn off, even if there's no engine firing. And it was fine like now. That was triggered by me loading a quick save. Basically, I had to do an engine burn that you'll see in a second. I tried using Time Warp and it just glitched the game out and I couldn't cut the throttle and it was a disaster. So I had to load a previous save, and I'm now going to crossfade to me loading that previous save. And here, can you hear that? There's an engine burning in the background. My throttle is 0. There's nothing activated. And I've never had this glitch before. I think it might be to do with the Separatrons, because I don't typically fly rockets with spent Separatrons attached to them, but it's anyone's guess. If you've got any theories, do let me know. Of course, now we are burning an engine. I'm burning those Twitch engines. I've got 4 of them on this rocket, pointing backwards and forwards, so essentially completely cancel each other out, because I wanted to vent the fuel of the Saturn V third stage. Unfortunately, Kerbal Space Program 2 does not have fuel vents, yet, at least, like we did in Kerbal Space Program 1. So in order to vent the fuel, I just put these tiny engines on that would just burn the fuel. It took ages. It took like 15 minutes in real life, because I couldn't use Time Warp, because as I mentioned, when I tried using Time Warp, I then couldn't cut the throttle even when I dropped back down to 1 times Time Warp, and I still can't figure out what triggers this glitch and how to stop this glitch from happening. Again, I'm all ears if you know the answer down below. So I had to do it in real time, so it was literally took like 15 minutes. I went off and did something else, to be honest. So yeah, but look, there's still the engine sound, so I tried loading a quick save, and It's still, I did this a couple of times. I pressed F5, F9, F5, F9, going back and forth. Nothing was happening. I don't know what caused it. So then I just muted Kerbal Space Program 2 and I just listened to some podcasts. What did I listen to? I think I just, I got a second screen, right? So I can just watch YouTube videos. So I believe I watched the latest Half in the Bag from Red Letter Media. Great channel. I think, what's the quote I've heard before? That Red Letter Media is every YouTuber's favorite YouTuber. Definitely a case for me. Well, I've got loads of favorite YouTubers. I can't pick a favorite aside from myself, obviously. What can I say? I'm just so humble. Anyway, I kind of got a bit sidetracked there. I never actually said why I wanted to drain the fuel tank of the Saturn V third stage, and that is because NASA looked into something called a wet laboratory. After the lower stage fuel tank had run out of fuel, it could then just be opened up and then the astronauts could convert it into a functioning laboratory module. And from now on, all course correction burns and all that jazz can be done by the Apollo command module, because obviously we've got the full fuel tank there with the kind of, I know it's a bit rubbish because it's a dual nozzle engine, whereas the real Apollo command module's engine was just one engine bell, right? But we haven't got the Wolfhound anymore in KSP2, and I couldn't really think of I couldn't find a good analog for the Apollo command module engine in KSP2. I did think about using is it the Trumpet? You know, the one with the extendable engine bell, but I just thought that would be a bit naff. And the Terrier engine isn't quite beefy looking enough, so dual nozzle poodle it is. It was a compromise, much like a lot of things. It's been about, hey, look at that, we're at Eve. That was quick, wasn't it? I guess we didn't even need the extra space provided to us by the wet laboratory, because it only took a matter of seconds, thanks to the power of Time Warp and the power of video editing. Now, we're going to deploy our 2 probes. Now, it's just as well... Oh, by the way, I should have mentioned, I did put myself on a suborbital trajectory, or suborbital flyby trajectory, so a collision course would be the correct word there, just so that the probes would then, enter Eve's atmosphere, because the probes don't have any engines or fuel themselves, just the profile I needed to get them to fit inside the cargo bay. I just couldn't find any elegant way of including engines and fuel tanks to them, so I went with this option where we can just use the Apollo command module's engine to put ourselves on an atmospheric collision course, and then the probes can then just detach from the mothership, and then the mothership can then course correct so it doesn't enter Eve's atmosphere, and in doing so we can actually course correct properly and make sure that we encounter Kerbin. I was getting this weird glitch where clearly my encounter nodes there on the maneuver plan are close enough that we should be encountering Kerbin, right? It's got a pretty big sphere of influence, but for whatever reason the encounter wasn't showing up. So I'm like, well, this clearly looks close enough, so let's just execute the burn, and maybe a Kerbin encounter will just appear as we get close to that closest approach point. It's happened to me before where KSP2 just says, oh, you're not going to be encountering, but I'm like, I'm literally within 5,000 kilometers of the planet, which is well within its sphere of influence. So I don't know if the game, again, this is like the patched Connex issue I mentioned earlier, where the maneuver plan isn't really able to plan so far ahead on your maneuvers. Maybe it'll get fixed because KSP1 could do this at some point in the future. Maybe I'm an idiot and there's a setting I've not enabled. Who knows? Could be any of them, really. So I don't want to put too much blame on KSP2, just in case it was all my fault and I've just slandered the game for no reason. Now, this is where the fun begins. We can time warp down to a nice close approach of Eve and get a good look. Oh, well, apparently I've gone to the map screen now, so we can't get a good look. But now we're nice and close. As you can see, the probes are miles behind us. So we can just do our nice Eve flyby with our crew, possibly get them out on EVA, maybe, which I don't think was part of the original NASA plan, but I'm going to one-up NASA. This could even be the next installment of my Space Race Speedrun series. Remember that? That was a video series that I did. There's Jebediah. Is that Jebediah or is that Bill? Does it say on the screen? Oh yeah, Bill Cubbin. Yeah, there's Bill Cubbin recording his observations of the situation. Then we can get him back on the ship, and then just a second. So this commentary has been made after I've edited all the footage together. So I'm like, yeah, now I'm gonna switch to the probe. Now I'm gonna save, and then we're gonna now we switch to the probe. Absolutely fantastic video, I know. Now, I didn't notice, I just observed that, yes, the probe doesn't have any engines, right? So maybe I can unmute the game and we can record audio again. And it turns out we're not getting that weird engine audio glitch. So you can actually hear the magnificent sound of Eve deadly entry. Here we go, very quickly getting those flames appear, and there we are. It went really well. I was very nervous actually about the solar panels, because as you can see they are jutting beyond the safety region of our heat shield, but there wasn't even a temperature gauge, and I was playing with 100% re-entry heating, normal settings, all that stuff. I guess just the thermal hitbox detection range of the solar panels is actually just like flush with their attachment point rather than the panel itself. So there we are, look at that! The original NASA mission, we were deployed probes into Venus to kind of learn things about the way the universe works. And we've actually done that but it's meta, right? We've learned about the meta of KSP2 by doing this mission. What a brilliant discovery we've made. We've learned how solar panel thermal works. So we can design, craft, and not have to worry too much about whether or not solar panels are jutting out. At least these very specific solar panels. I cannot say if this applies to the others. Now you might remember I said, we'll have 2 identical probes so that one can be the redundant for the other. And we can't control 2 probes simultaneously in KSP. So actually, that's the canon version of what happened. One of our probes failed. So now we've got this one to actually work. As you can see, we've run our atmospheric analysis. Now we need to transmit it, but we've run out of electricity. So we're kind of having to just pause transmission, wait for the batteries to recharge a bit with the solar panels, then resume transmission, repeat. But now it's a bit too low. We're just going to come in for a landing, so I'm going to retract the antenna. There we are. We don't actually need the antenna. We've got a direct connection to the mothership, which has a big communication dish on board, but I don't know, looks a bit cooler, doesn't it, having the antenna extended. Then we could just time warp to recharge the batteries and complete our transmission of our Eve atmospheric data analysis. Can't bring back the samples, but, that's the reality of this mission. Maybe at some point, I'm sure there's a way you can build an Eve lander in the profile of a Saturn V. I've done a Saturn V mission to Tylo, so I'm sure it's possible to do a Saturn V mission to Eve. Someone's probably already done it, to be honest. But yeah, that's maybe something I could do in the future. But that's the that concludes our Eve atmospheric / landing adventure with the unmanned lander. So now it's time to cut back to the ship. And I did leave the audio unmuted just to see if the engine burning sound glitch persisted, and it unfortunately did. So we have to have the rest of the video in silence now, or at least the gameplay in silence, right? You still got my obnoxious voice to tolerate as we make our return back to Kerbin. As you can see, we still don't have a perfect Kerbin encounter. So there we are, just a minor mid-course correction burn will be required just to get ourselves on a Kerbin atmospheric entry course. But we got a lot of delta V remaining, over 1 kilometer per second, and this is only going to take us 35 meters per second according to the maneuver plan right now. I can't remember if we need to do a second burn because of the accuracy of the maneuver plan maker. It doesn't always perfectly get things right, but for now at least it's going to be very cheap. And if we did need to do a further correction, it's going to be essentially 0, isn't it? So I hope you enjoyed this mission, by the way. I think it's a really, really interesting one, because when you first hear, oh, NASA was planning to send astronauts on an Apollo spacecraft to Venus, you think, how logistically would that work? And then you think, okay, maybe, in the space of the LEM, there could be a laboratory or something, but still, it seems a bit small. So it's really interesting reading about, the concept of the wet lab. Whether or not the wet lab would ever actually have been a thing remains to, because it remains to be seen. This is never going to happen. The Saturn V will never be built again, unfortunately. But, there have been other plans made by NASA to have, a wet laboratory. One was I don't know if it was ever actually called Skylab 2, but it's essentially the sequel to Skylab, which would have involved the spent stage of a spent upper stage of the SLS, which of course is a rocket that's currently operational. So wet labs could still be a thing. Who knows? They might even add a wet lab to the Gateway station as an experiment thing, or space stations are a big thing right now, aren't they? Because obviously China's got a space station, Blue Origin's on about building a space station, we're currently getting ready for Lunar Gateway, the ISS is coming towards the end of its lifespan. Lots of space station talk recently. And I guess Starship, its payload bay is the size of a space station. But here we are, speaking of Starship, we're meeting a similar fate to old S-28 right now, aren't we? We're completely disintegrating. But luckily the bits that we don't want disintegrating, the Apollo re-entry module, well, that's holding up nice and fine. It looks like we're going to be coming down to land on the mainland. This is more China/Soviet space program, or Blue Origin space program. That comes down to rest basically right next to its launch pad, because that's a suborbital hop, but it's still landing on land regardless. There go the parachutes. And yeah, that's I guess that pretty much wraps the video. I'm trying to think if there's any any burning things I need to address before it all comes to an end. But I don't think there is. Like I say, I hope you enjoyed this mission. Hey, maybe I've inspired you to read more about. I'll put some links to the NASA official document about the plan for the Apollo Venus mission, which you can try and read, like I tried to read, and then got a bit bored and I just read the Wikipedia page. You can just read the Wikipedia page as well. I'll put both in the description. Why not? And yeah, there's our capsule safely landed, so we can zoom out and check in on the other one. Of course, our probe on the surface of Venus/Eve. And also the names of my Patreon supporters and my YouTube channel members, who I really, really appreciate. They make all of this content possible. A massive thank you, guys, for your support. If you want to support my channel as well, you can click that little white black logo. I hate the new Patreon logo so much. It's on the screen. This is a link in the description. I've already said I hope you enjoyed the video and all that, so I'll just say thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.